welcome to Slave Codes, Jim Crow, and Impacting Legacy. What comes to your mind when you think of the words slavery and law? Here in the U.S., most of us probably think of the transatlantic slave trade and how thousands of Africans were stolen from their homeland and forced into slavery here in the southern region of the United States. But what does slavery have to do with law? According to the Oxford Dictionary, laws are a system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. With the legalizing of slavery came the seemingly permanent position of being subservient, prohibited, and being seen as less than human. But slavery within the colonies and the enactment of slave codes didn't happen right away. In 1619, the first 20 Africans arrived within the colonies. During that time, both white and black indentured servants worked alongside each other. As they blended, they began to marry and have interracial relationships. The problem with that is the colonists viewed the Africans as inferior. Because of this, miscegenation laws were enacted to make interracial relationships and marriages illegal. Though those Africans arrived as indentured servants with the plan of being free of their labor and services to their debtor within a few years, a man named John Punch was the first African to be enslaved for life after he and two white indentured servants tried to escape. The white indentured servants were only given a few more years on top of their initial time while he became enslaved for life. By the 1660s, race-based slavery became a part of American society, and Africans were enslaved while white indentured servants were able to be accepted into society because of their race. As farming and agriculture grew, slavery became the social and economic foundation for the colonies. As more Africans were being brought over to enslave, the need to create laws to keep the enslaved under control, oppressed, and legally subservient to their masters seemed to be the next step. Some of the major slave codes were the Three-Fifths Compromise, which was where 3 out of 5 enslaved people were counted for legislation and taxation purposes. Others were that children of enslaved women were of the condition of their mother, even if their father was the master. Enslaved people were not allowed to leave their master's plantation without written documents approving their movement. The enslaved were also not allowed to learn to read or write. The enslaved also couldn't go into legal agreements, which included marriage, nor did they have the right to vote. For North Carolina, slaves were not allowed to hold firearms, not allowed to have social gatherings without the permission of their master. Slaves that could read weren't permitted to teach other enslaved people. Slaves and free black people weren't allowed to preach or gather in public. And the enslaved could not own property. Specifically in North Carolina, they could not own cattle. Black people and some white abolitionists fought the institution of slavery by running away, staging riots, and creating events to share the impacts of slavery on black people. From 1861 to 1865, the North and the South fought in the Civil War. And in 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves, but abolishment of slavery didn't come until 1865. And that is when the South went into what is considered the Reconstruction era. The newly freed black people now had the opportunity to gain some of the same equality and equity as their white counterparts. In 1868, the 15th Amendment allowed black men to have full citizenship, and many voted, ran for offices, and served on juries. The Freedmen's Bureau was allowed black people to also learn to read, write, develop certain skills that will allow them to find jobs so they can begin to make a living for themselves. It wasn't until the federal troops withdrew from the South 10 years later in 1877 that the black people began to experience violence and oppression from whites who wanted white supremacy and white power to remain. All the freedoms and rights that black people had begun to benefit from were quickly denied, and a series of racist statutes became legalized and known as the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was a slang term used against black men and became the name for the set of rules that separated blacks to a second-class citizenship. These laws were based on white supremacy as a reaction to the Reconstruction era and the fear of black people taking jobs and certain benefits from them. Racism against black people was even a tactic used within the political arena to gain votes of poor white people. Just like the slave codes, the Jim Crow laws differed from state to state, but the one law that was similar across the board was the denial of the right to vote. Or colored-only signs were hung in windows, over doors, water fountains, and restrooms. Prisons, hospitals, transportation systems, public schools, colleges, and all public places were segregated. From the 1870s up until the 1960s, black people and other advocates fought for civil rights, which led to what is now known as the Civil Rights Movement. The movement's goal was to gain all the equality, equity, and civil rights that black people had been denied. By the 1960s, segregation began to dissipate, and a lot of the state and local Jim Crow laws were revoked. But what are the lasting impacts of the slave codes and the Jim Crow laws? Over the last 60 years, things have improved drastically for black people and other people of color. But there are still lasting impacts that black people endure as a result of slave codes and Jim Crow laws. There are still systematic racism and prejudice that black people and other advocates are fighting against today, such as voter suppression, racial discrimination in the form of microaggressions, prejudices, and stereotypes against black people or other people of color. The fight for equality has come so far, but it should not stop until the remnants of those Europeans who saw those Africans as inferior is no longer the thought or ideology of many people in this country today.